Listen carefully, because this is not what you expected. In the blink of an eye, faster than your conscious mind can grasp, you made a move so deadly, so devastating. It crushed spiritual chains that have held generations captive. The enemy, completely blindsided. They didn't hear a single warning. They just watched their entire fortress crumble silently, piece by piece. And you were already miles away. Victorious and unseen. Chosen one. This was no mistake. This was a divine strike, a spiritual earthquake that has rewritten every rule they thought unbreakable. Today, we expose the terrifying truth behind how you, without even realizing it, became the breaker of ancient curses and dark legacies. If your spirit is stirred by this revelation, type 777 below to declare your place among the unstoppable. And from the depths of my heart, thank you to everyone who supports this mission through Super Thanks. Your faith ignites this unstoppable movement. Hold tight. What I'm about to share next will shake your entire reality. God's chosen ones. You unintentionally broken every spiritual pattern, the horrifying truth. You didn't merely interrupt a repetitive cycle, you dismantled the very architectural framework that held it together. Imagine the cycle of spiritual patterns as an intricate blueprint etched deep within the unseen realms, a divine design that, once intact, allowed old wounds, toxic relationships, and generational strongholds to rebuild endlessly. Most people try to resist these patterns only when they manifest, like attempting to demolish a crumbling house while ignoring the architectural plans hidden in the attic. But as long as those plans exist, the structure can be rebuilt, sometimes even stronger than before. In Proverbs 3:5-6, we are reminded, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight. This submission, this surrender, is what enabled you to access a deeper level, not just fighting symptoms, but erasing the source. You ventured into the invisible blueprints, the spiritual DNA that scripted these patterns, and dismantled them at their origin, leaving no scaffold for reconstruction. Why then do certain people from your past continue to attempt their old manipulations? They cling to the same emotional hooks, deploy identical tactics of confusion and control, and replay the same dramas that once ensnared you. But now, their efforts are futile. It's like a musician trying to play a piano unplugged from electricity. The keys respond to touch, but no melody emerges. Their frustration grows, compounded by their ignorance of why their influence no longer binds you. This shift is deeper than surface transformation. Jeremiah 3:3 promises, I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. You have effectively nullified the energetic covenant that once allowed these patterns to thrive within your spirit. The invisible handshake, that subconscious resonance, has been rescinded. The doorways that once welcomed old temptations have been sealed with bricks of divine authority. Have you noticed how temptations that once overwhelmed you now scarcely register? This isn't a matter of sheer willpower. It is akin to severing the oxygen line feeding a fire. Without its breath, the blaze cannot ignite. Spiritual physics tells us this is an act of severing energetic frequencies, disrupting the resonance between you and the former sources of bondage. The frequency shift is profound, much like a tuning fork that no longer vibrates in harmony with a broken note. Few speak about the exhaustion that accompanies this work of deep spiritual renovation. It is far from glamorous to descend into the shadowed chambers where generational curses and ancient spiritual contracts dwell. It requires a rare blend of psychological insight. Akin to an architect conducting a meticulous forensic analysis of a crumbling cathedral, identifying every crack and fault line invisible to the casual eye. It demands surrender to the death of familiar identities that once found comfort in dysfunction. In the words of renowned speaker and author Brené Brown, who explores the courage it takes to embrace vulnerability and transformation, owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. This is the paradox you face to dismantle old blueprints. You must be willing to let parts of yourself die. That is the true cost of spiritual freedom. You didn't just challenge a pattern, you became a new creation. A vessel incapable of housing old strongholds. The spiritual terrain surrounding you has shifted irrevocably. As Isaiah 43, 18-19 proclaims, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing." Indeed, the old blueprint has been obliterated, replaced by a divine design of restoration and victory. Because of this, the chains that held others captive for decades, chains forged in pain, deception, and broken covenants can no longer claim dominion over you. You stand beyond their reach, anointed and sealed by a power that transcends understanding. Have you ever pondered what it truly means to break free, not just on the surface, but at the foundational level? What happens when the very frequencies of bondage are tuned out of your life's spiritual architecture? This is your reality now, and as the Apostle Paul declared in Romans 8:37, "No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us." This conquering isn't passive, it is an active architectural renovation of the soul. You are rebuilding your life on a foundation of rock, not sand, a sacred structure designed to withstand every storm. Stand now, God's chosen, and rise with the strength of one who has not only broken chains, but also restructured the very heavens of their spiritual existence. The blueprints of bondage are erased. The future is yours to build, unshakable, eternal, victorious. You have moved the entire arena of spiritual warfare beyond the enemy's reach, elevating the battleground to a dimension they cannot even access. This single, decisive shift transformed the conflict altogether. Repeated struggles persist not because the enemy gains strength, but because the battles are fought on the same terrain, the same emotional fields, the same mental trigger points. The very ground the enemy knows well and expertly manipulates. This is their comfort zone. Like a predator stalking familiar hunting grounds. Salm 18:39 declares, "For you equipped me with strength for the battle. You made those who rise against me sink under me." This strength came not by brute force, but through a radical repositioning, a shift of the spiritual battlefield to new territory. Imagine a wild river winding through a dense forest. The predator knows every bend and shadow along the banks, waiting patiently to strike. But if the river suddenly changes course, carving a new path through untouched earth, the predator's knowledge becomes obsolete. It can no longer lie in wait where the prey once was. This natural transformation is akin to the spiritual repositioning you enacted, moving the stream of conflict into a new channel where old traps no longer function. So, what if your unseen move has already shifted the entire battlefield? Are you ready to walk confidently in this new territory where the enemy can no longer trap you? Most conflicts repeat because the fight happens on familiar grounds. The emotional frequency, where the enemy can transmit their attacks with perfect resonance. You find peace not by rearranging the circumstances of your life, but by realizing who you are at the deepest level. Eckhart Tolle. These frequencies act like radio waves, as long as you remain tuned to the same channel. The enemy's signals pierce through your defenses. However, by elevating yourself to a different frequency, a higher spiritual, mental, and emotional vibration, you render their transmissions silent. The German composer Johann Sebastian Bach, whose music often reflected divine order and harmony, once said, "The aim and final end of all music should be none other than the glory of God and the refreshment of the soul." This is the essence of your shift. You tuned your soul to a higher, harmonious frequency that refreshes rather than depletes, leaving the discord of old battles unheard, the enemy's insults, their cunning games, and manipulations are still dispatched. But they fall like letters sent to an abandoned address. They wait for a reaction, a crack in your armor, a defensive response. But all they receive is silence, because you are no longer present on that battlefield. The spiritual laws of energy and attraction affirm this. Energy resonates with its own kind. Remaining in old emotional states allowed the enemy's frequency to find you easily. Now, you've changed your resonance. The higher you ascend, the more elusive you become to their familiar tactics. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Colossians 3:2. This isn't mere optimism or forced positivity, it's intentional. A deliberate choice of where your mind and spirit reside. You refuse to engage on their terms. You reject the distractions they offer. This is the refined architecture of the soul. An advanced sanctuary crafted with precision, where only sacred energies are allowed to dwell in the natural world. This is reminiscent of a lone eagle soaring far above the plains, unseen by the foxes and wolves below. The eagle's vantage point grants it clarity and control. The predators, accustomed to stalking prey on the ground, cannot reach it in the skies. The same applies to your spiritual elevation. The enemy's ground-level weapons of chaos and confusion lose their potency because you now fight from clarity, peace, and strategic calm. If you've already risen above the chaos, like the eagle in the sky, why are you still letting ground-level battles steal your peace? Chaos was their fortress and shield. Your refusal to engage in that chaotic ground strips them of their defenses. The battlefield is now in your territory, governed by your terms and divine order. Herein lies the true power of this repositioning. When the enemy can no longer reach you, they are forced to retreat or turn their aggression inward, battling among themselves. Their source of strength, derived from your prior accessibility, becomes a dead end. Romans 6:20. The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. This crushing is not always loud or visible, but often occurs in the silence of the higher realm, the new battleground you now occupy. Have you felt how peace replaces the turmoil? How does clarity dispel confusion? This is the divine architecture of your soul's new fortress. Where the enemy's former weapons lose resonance, you have become a sanctuary tuned to the frequency of heaven, inaccessible to the old patterns of attack. Stand firm, God's chosen, and claim this victory fully. The battlefield has shifted. The enemy's game is broken. It is time to rise with the authority given and fight from your high ground, unshakable, victorious, and free. Throughout the ages, spiritual and generational patterns have persisted like unseen codes embedded deep within the fabric of human experience. These cycles survive by relying on one fundamental principle: predictability. They anticipate that when certain pressures arise, familiar reactions will inevitably follow. Fear manifests with its familiar weight. Pride storms with its usual force. And pain funnels souls into the same destructive decisions over and over again. But what if these patterns are not as unyielding as they appear? What if the relentless loop assumes the next generation will unwittingly follow the exact same script, marching blindly into the same traps? Salm 147, 3 declares. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. Yet, these spiritual loops assume brokenness is permanent, a never-ending cycle that traps the unaware in repetition. You, however, broke this cycle, where the pattern expected anger. You offered calm composure when it anticipated surrender. You persisted with steadfast resolve, and where it expected you to seek approval, you walked away, refusing to play the game. You became the unpredictable variable, the element the ancient pattern never planned for. This transformation is not accidental nor superficial. It is a profound shift in awareness that reshapes the entire equation. This change did not occur because life suddenly became easier. Quite the opposite. It was forged in the crucible of your toughest trials. What altered was your perception, your consciousness. Have you noticed how often life scenarios seem pre-scripted, like an intricate play where every act and scene pushes you toward a foregone conclusion? You began to perceive the setup before the climax unfolded, discerning the invisible hand guiding events. Instead of becoming a passive actor, you began dismantling the chain link by link, thought by thought. Psychology explains this phenomenon through metacognition, the ability to think about one's own thinking. Patterns thrive on unconscious reactions, feeding off automatic responses in the human mind. But metacognition breaks the loop. Once you observe the moves made against you, you no longer fall prey to them. Isaiah 43:19 reminds us, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? This new thing is your awakening." Your rebellion against spiritual determinism. You refused to be another piece in the game. Instead, you became the player who surveys the entire board. Your role as the variable is immensely powerful because it causes the entire pattern to collapse, not just in your own life, but reverberating through the lives of those connected to you. The moment the script is shown to be rewritable, the curse loses its inevitability. Others may remain bound by old cycles, but they can no longer claim the pattern is unbreakable. Romans 12 exhort. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This renewal you embraced caused the pattern's death. Once a person chooses differently, the entire equation fails. The moment the pattern loses control is the moment it dies. The spiritual architecture of your life has been reconstructed with precision, every act of awareness acting like a keystone in a vaulted ceiling. Every choice, a buttress supporting your freedom. Your journey resembles the process of a master architect restoring a crumbling cathedral, reinforcing every weakened beam and shoring up hidden cracks until the structure stands firm against every storm. One inspiring example is Cardinal Robert Sarah, a prominent Catholic leader known for his unwavering faith amid global challenges. His call for spiritual renewal emphasizes how courageously confronting old patterns can ignite a revival of divine life within. He once said, "The world tells you to give up, the Spirit tells you to rise." Have you recognized how your conscious rebellion not only frees you, but shakes the foundations beneath others who share your lineage? This ripple effect challenges inherited destinies and invites a new blueprint, one authored by divine intention and personal resolve. Hebrews 12:1 encourages us to throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Your shedding of the old self has dismantled the spiritual strongholds formerly unassailable. Now, stand tall. God's chosen one, your victory is not passive. It is a triumphant act of will and faith. You have become the unpredictable variable that ancient patterns never accounted for. This is your moment to rise. Rewrite the story and claim your unshakable freedom. Within many families, there exist spiritual tripwires, deeply embedded patterns so intricately woven into the fabric of generational memory that a single word, a particular accusation, or a recurring situation can unleash a flood of stored anger, shame, and division spanning decades. These invisible buttons, programmed across generations, act like automatic detonators, triggering predictable reactions, no matter how subtle the spark. They might be certain taboo topics that unfailingly ignite conflict, specific phrases that cut like knives, or even particular times of the year known to provoke tension without fail. For years, these triggers operated flawlessly, sustained by the unconscious acceptance of the cycle. No one paused to question or dismantle them. Instead, everyone walked blindly into the trap repeatedly, mistaking the resultant chaos for a normal part of family dynamics. Isaiah 54:17 reminds us, "No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you." Yet these tripwires functioned as spiritual weapons, cleverly disguised as everyday triggers. You, however, stood apart and deactivated them, not with grand declarations, but through quiet resolve and acute awareness. You noticed the recurring patterns, discerned the emotional setups carefully laid out, and chose not to take the bait any longer. Have you ever wondered what it feels like when the storm inside you finally ceases, when the familiar triggers no longer set off the old battles? The process was far from simple. These triggers were designed to feel intensely personal, engineered to elicit defensiveness, lashings out, or spirals into guilt and shame. Yet instead of reacting, you held stillness. Instead of matching the energy hurled at you, you allowed it to pass without fueling the fire. In the beginning, this shift unsettled those around you. When they pulled the lever, expecting the usual explosive response and found only calm, their balance faltered. The silence, the absence of chaos, was alien to them. But this was the very point. A trigger derives its power solely from the reaction it evokes. By refusing engagement, you cut the wire. This transformation transcends merely not getting bothered. It is a complete rewiring of your inner responses, a recalibration so profound that words and situations which once pulled you into emotional storms no longer hold dominion. It is akin to healing the structural fractures that once made the building vulnerable to collapse. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the brain's remarkable ability to rewire itself in response to new experiences and learning through deliberate choice and repeated practice. Neural pathways that once triggered automatic emotional reactions are replaced with circuits of peace and resilience. You rewired the circuitry that allowed old triggers to dominate your spirit. Jeremiah ehon telti pense tretas promises. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. This divine rewiring manifests as a spiritual law embedded within your very being, guiding your responses with divine grace and strength. Have you sensed the profound difference when old wounds no longer echo in your mind, when words lose their sting, and moments that once provoked you now pass like gentle breezes. Now, those once potent tripwires are reduced to hollow gestures. They have lost power not only over you, but over the future generations connected to your bloodline. Because when one person in a lineage learns to remain steady and unshaken when the trigger is pulled, that emotional weapon becomes defunct forever. The pattern's blueprint for chaos has been rewritten. Proverbs 3:5-6 instructs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. This trust is the foundation for disarming the traps of the past. Imagine a forest where a species of tree had long been vulnerable to a specific parasite, each outbreak devastating entire groves. Then, one tree develops a natural resistance, halting the parasite's spread. Over time, the entire forest adapts, and the parasite's threat becomes a relic of the past. So too, your steady resistance acts like that resilient tree, halting the spread of emotional toxins through your lineage. Romans 8:37 declares, "In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us." Your victory in deactivating these triggers is a conquering of invisible spiritual warfare, a triumph that breaks the cycle and seals the gates of future pain. Have you reflected on how such calm defiance alters the dynamics around you? How does the absence of reaction destabilize what once seemed unstoppable? How profound the silence can be when the storm no longer finds wind. You have ended the game before anyone even realized it had started. And that is the power of a soul aligned with divine truth. In the realm of spiritual transformation, few understand the subtle power of rewiring the soul's frequency, the deep inner shift that renders old summons powerless. The story of Viktor Frankl, the renowned Austrian neurologist and Holocaust survivor, whose remarkable psychological insight gave birth to logotherapy, a method that emphasizes finding meaning amidst suffering. Frankl's ability to consciously choose his response, despite unimaginable external horrors, echoes the very essence of spiritual rewiring, transcending automatic reactions to embrace freedom in the spirit. There is a profound reason why certain struggles in life do not present themselves as random mistakes or harmless habits, but rather as persistent summons, spiritual calls designed to pull you back into cycles you fought relentlessly to break. As a dog returns to its vomit, fools repeat their folly. Proverbs 26:11. These summons often appear as sudden, unshakable urges, familiar temptations revisiting your doorstep, or uncanny coincidences so precise they feel orchestrated, all with the intent of leading you right back to where you once escaped. Have you ever paused to ask why certain moments feel like invisible magnets pulling you toward old pain? Most remain unaware of the invisible frequencies they respond to, unknowingly tuning into these spiritual channels that beckon with magnetic force. Yet you did not simply resist with sheer willpower, a fragile shield that still listens to the call and struggles to say no. Instead, you rewired your very spiritual frequency, shifting the channel on which your soul operates. This transformation is like a sophisticated architectural upgrade to your spiritual operating system, a recalibration of your inner resonance. Imagine a radio receiver that once caught static-filled signals on a certain frequency, now retuned to an entirely new bandwidth where those old summons are silent, unheard. The calls are still broadcast, echoing through the ether, but you are no longer within their range. Isaiah 40:31 reassures us, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint." Your renewal is this, soaring, arising above the spiritual noise to a higher realm of clarity and peace. The depth of this work goes beyond mere willpower. It is a profound rewiring of the soul's response system, akin to the neuroscientific concept of synaptic plasticity, where repeated, intentional effort reshapes the neural connections to form new patterns of thought and behavior. You healed the hidden wounds and severed unresolved spiritual agreements that once granted these summons access. Jeremiah 32:27 proclaims, I am the Lord, the God of all mankind. Is anything too hard for me? Your willingness to confront these invisible chains and dissolve the contracts behind them echoes this divine power. Have you noticed how the things that once triggered you now fail to stir even a flicker of emotion? Once the hooks of those old cycles lose their emotional resonance, no reaction, no curiosity, no spark ignited. The chains break, the doorways close, and the traps become invisible shadows. The summons lose their ability to lure because there is nothing in you that desires what they offer anymore. Proverbs 3:5-6 instructs, Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. This trust is the foundation for disarming the traps of the past. Imagine a forest where a species of tree had long been vulnerable to a specific parasite, each outbreak devastating entire groves. Then, one tree develops a natural resistance, halting the parasite's spread. Over time, the entire forest adapts, and the parasite's threat becomes a relic of the past. So too, your steady resistance acts like that resilient tree, halting the spread of emotional toxins through your lineage. Romans 8:37 declares, In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Your victory in deactivating these triggers is a conquering of invisible spiritual warfare, a triumph that breaks the cycle and seals the gates of future pain. Have you considered how your calm defiance confounds those who once pulled your strings? How does the silence in place of your usual reaction disrupt their expectations? How often does true peace reveal itself in the absence of chaos? What new power emerges when the summons you once heard becomes nothing but silence? You have ended the game before anyone even realized it had started. And that is the power of a soul aligned with divine truth. Some spiritual patterns, while powerful, are not infinite by design. Every curse or generational stronghold carries a built-in expiration date, a threshold after which it can no longer sustain itself unless renewed by the next person in the chain. This is why certain struggles seem to repeat within families. The curse doesn't live forever on its own. It survives because someone, knowingly or unknowingly, continues to carry it forward. The son will not share the guilt of the father, nor will the father share the guilt of the son. Ezekiel 18:20. Through repeated choices, unconscious agreements, or wounds left unhealed, the curse feeds on this ongoing legacy. It expects each generation to falter at the same point, allowing the cycle to reset and continue endlessly. This persistent expectation forms a spiritual architecture of bondage, designed carefully to maintain control across time and bloodlines. Like a blueprint for defeat etched into the fabric of family history. Have you ever sensed the heavy weight of inherited struggles and wondered if they are truly unbreakable? What if the power of these cycles depends entirely on being passed along, like a relay race where the baton is willingly handed over? How many times have you found yourself walking the same paths of pain, seemingly caught in a loop with no exit? What would it mean to step outside this cycle and claim a new destiny, free from the patterns of the past? The enemy expects collapse at these critical moments, certain ages or seasons when life's hardships peak, yet you reached beyond that point, while others before you gave in, surrendered to despair, or repeated destructive behaviors. You stood strong. Your endurance became a fortress against the curse's refreshment. The moment you refused to surrender, you dismantled the enemy's timetable, breaking the cycle's rhythm like a steadfast mountain standing firm against raging storms. Your resilience became a testament to divine empowerment beyond human expectation. Psalm 27:1 proclaims, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life, of whom shall I be afraid?" This verse embodies your spiritual stance, anchored and unshaken in divine strength. It is this strength that shielded you from the inherited darkness, empowering you to walk boldly where many faltered. How often do you remind yourself of this divine protection in moments of trial? In what ways has this unshakable faith transformed your journey? Your survival surpasses the physical realm. It is an emotional and spiritual triumph. You refuse to harbor bitterness, addiction, or anger roots that would have allowed the curse to take deeper hold. By rejecting these, you closed the door the curse sought to enter. This is the victory of sanctified self-control and spiritual maturity, a deliberate choice to nurture healing rather than harbor pain. The subtle but decisive act of denying the curse's access ripples through your soul, rewriting the legacy for those who come after you. A curse requires consent, often unconsciously granted by agreeing to react repeatedly in familiar, damaging ways. You broke this cycle and withdrew your consent. Have you noticed how the invisible chains that once constrained your family line are loosening in your hands? What does freedom feel like when the burden of inherited pain is lifted? How does your newfound peace affect your relationships and future generations? How much of this victory rests in the quiet choices made day by day? Refusing to play the old game. Consider the story of Nick Vujicic, a renowned motivational speaker born without arms and legs, despite overwhelming challenges that could have chained him to despair. Nick chose to break generational cycles of hopelessness and limitation. His life exemplifies breaking the curse of perceived inability through faith and perseverance. He famously says, "If I fail, I try again, and again, and again." Nick's story teaches us that breaking a cycle requires relentless determination and a spirit anchored in hope, even when circumstances appear insurmountable. Jeremiah 29:11 reminds us, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." This divine plan unfolds when the chains of the past are broken. It is an invitation to step boldly into a life shaped not by ancestral defeat, but by heavenly purpose. What visions of hope are stirring within your heart as you embrace this promise? How will your life serve as a beacon for others still caught in the shadows? Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Your renewal fractured the curse's foundation, making it powerless against your faith. This renewing is not a momentary change, but a continuous architectural remodeling of your inner being, a spiritual rebuilding that strengthens every foundation stone. How do you cultivate this renewal daily? Ensuring that no cracks form for old patterns to creep back in. The curse tried to outlast you, betting on history's repetition, but you outlived its reach. You refused to pass it on to your children, your relationships, or your community. You starved it of its only lifeline, a willing host. This is the ultimate act of spiritual warfare, not through confrontation, but through perseverance and refusal. The curse has no power where no consent is given. How profound is this power residing quietly in your steadfast refusal? Psalm 103 to 2:3 commands. Praise the Lord, my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your sins and heals all your diseases. Your healing marks the end of the curse's dominion. It is a holistic restoration, touching mind, body, and spirit, forging you into a new creation. What new freedoms await when the invisible pressure lifts? How does it feel to live lighter, knowing the chain is broken and will never bind your future? What doors open when you walk unburdened by the weight of ancestral pain? How will your life testify to the power of God's deliverance? You are now a living testimony to the power of perseverance and divine grace. The curse's expiration date has passed, and with your victory, it can never again claim your life or lineage. Stand tall, God's chosen. The reign of the curse is over, and your life shines as a beacon of hope for generations to come. Some cycles continue to survive because someone keeps accepting the role they have been assigned, like actors trapped in a script they never chose. Within toxic family systems, broken relationships, and spiritual warfare, an unspoken narrative circulates, well rehearsed and memorized by all involved. You were expected to be the villain, the one who loses control, makes mistakes, or utters words that give others ammunition to label you the problem. Yet, you shattered their expectations by refusing to play the role they wrote for you. How many times did they bait you with the same insults, the same emotional traps, the same old scenes designed to provoke? Each time they waited for your reaction to fuel their story, but this time, you stayed silent. Not out of weakness or passivity, but because the old you no longer existed. Isaiah 41, 10 Asures as. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. It is this divine strength that enabled you to step off their stage. When their rehearsed arguments found no opponent, the scenes lost energy and purpose. Like a fire deprived of oxygen, their drama dwindled. Have you noticed how the absence of your expected reaction leaves others confused, scrambling for new narratives? What happens when the one who always fueled the conflict simply refuses to engage? You destroyed the script they relied upon. Some spiritual patterns and toxic people exist only because you agree to play a certain part. When you stop performing, you strip away their main plotline. You don't just disrupt a scene, you end the entire story they hope to tell. Jeremiah 17 declares, "Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him." Your confidence shattered their control and broke their cycle. As the narrative collapsed, those invested in dysfunction face a choice: confront their own role or find someone else to fill the void. You chose to rewrite your role entirely, not merely refusing the part, but burning the costume, erasing the lines, and walking off the stage forever. Without your cooperation, the drama not only slowed, it ended. Psalm 39 advises, "Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it." This peace is the new script you live by, one that refuses the villain's role. Your transformation resembles the final crescendo of a great European opera, where the hero's defiance changes the course of the story, silencing the antagonists forever. The great composer Giuseppe Verdi once wrote, "Without ambition, one starts nothing." Your ambition for peace dismantled their plans. How does it feel to be free from the chains of expectation? What new roles do you now embrace? How will your silence speak louder than any conflict? What legacy will you leave by choosing peace over performance? Romans 8, 37 reminds us, "In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us." Your victory in refusing the villain's part is a triumph beyond words. Stand now, God's chosen. Your refusal to play their script has ended the drama. You are free, victorious, and walking a new path, one authored by the divine and lived in truth. Patterns do not arise from randomness. They communicate in a distinct spiritual language composed of cues, dones, attitudes, and calculated moves designed to provoke specific reactions. Like a sophisticated code, certain words and behaviors act as keys that unlock deep reservoirs of anger, fear, guilt, or compliance within you. We are not ignorant of his schemes. 2 Corinthians 2:11. Understanding this language reveals that every conflict, every manipulation, and every repetitive history is scripted, a carefully architected play, orchestrated beyond surface appearances. Have you ever sensed the subtle pull of familiar emotional traps and wondered why they repeat despite changes in faces or settings? How often do these unspoken scripts dictate your responses before your conscious mind even registers? For much of your life, you responded instinctively, unknowingly participating in this silent conversation. But at a pivotal moment, you gained insight into the pattern's mechanics. You began to notice how the same emotional hooks surfaced repeatedly, the familiar tone that wasn't mere speech but bait, the hollow apology that disguised an invitation back into the same destructive loop. This realization was like discovering the blueprint behind a complex machine, enabling you to choose whether to keep running on its track or step off entirely. Psalm 46:10 commands, "Be still and know that I am God." This stillness was not avoidance or fear, but a deliberate, powerful silence, an intentional refusal to engage in the expected dialogue. Every time you withheld your reaction, you communicated, "This code no longer controls me." That silence was no emptiness. It was the dismantling of the pattern's communication network. In the realm of psychology, this reflects the concept of emotional regulation and response inhibition, where one consciously suppresses automatic reactive patterns, rewiring neural pathways to break free from conditioned behavior. Your soul became a fortress of calm, your mind a sanctuary where reactive impulses lost their grip. Jeremiah 9:11 invites. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. Your silence was walking the good way, refusing to be baited into chaos. The part of you once compelled to defend, justify, or retaliate became dormant, no longer available to power the old patterns. When a system loses its language, the ability to engage and provoke it loses authority, without your voice reinforcing it. The pattern's grip evaporated. This silence disrupted their control, not by weakness, but by mastery and fluency. Imagine a master architect who understands every beam and joint of a crumbling structure, instead of futilely patching visible cracks. The architect carefully deconstructs the faulty framework, ensuring the entire edifice no longer threatens collapse. You became that architect of your spirit, dismantling the invisible structure sustaining toxic cycles. One compelling example comes from Maya Angelou, a celebrated poet and civil rights activist whose quiet strength transformed oppression into resilience. She once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." By choosing silence strategically, she reclaimed her narrative, refusing to be defined by others' scripts. Her life reminds us that true power often speaks loudest in stillness. Have you felt the liberation when silence replaces conflict? How does refusing to speak their language change the battlefield? What happens when you rewrite the rules by simply not playing? How many chains can be broken by one quiet refusal? Romans 8:37 declares, "In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us." Your victory lies in this silent conquest, a peace that shatters old dialogues and sets your spirit free. Stand firm. God's chosen. Your silence is a thunderous roar in the spiritual realm. You have become fluent in the language of freedom. And your quietness ends, not just conversations, but the power those conversations once held over you. Some spiritual patterns are not self-sustaining forces, but parasites that thrive only on a steady supply of emotional energy. They feed on your fear, Outrage, guilt, or desperate need to be understood. As long as you reacted, whether consciously or not, you fed them life. The moment you stopped giving your energy, they began to wither. Yet, these parasitic patterns are cunning. They deceive you into believing your reaction is necessary. Have you ever felt trapped in a cycle where defending yourself seems mandatory? How often did you find yourself explaining, justifying, or engaging simply because you believed silence would mean surrender? Every reaction, even standing your ground, became fuel for the pattern's survival. This explains why these toxic cycles often return stronger, fueled by the very attention meant to silence them. You broke this cycle by severing its energy supply entirely. You stopped explaining yourself to those unwilling to understand. You refused to allow fear to dictate your actions. You stopped giving outrage freely when peace was challenged, because you no longer provided the emotional fuel it craved. The pattern began to fade, not with noise or fanfare, but quietly, day by day. Psalm 34:18 reminds us, "The Lord is close to the broken-hearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." In your silence and detachment, divine healing took root, cutting the parasite's lifeline. The people or forces behind the pattern might continue their tactics, but without your participation, their efforts are hollow. They cannot elicit the same reaction, and without it, their power diminishes. This victory required no battle. It was won through strategic detachment. By consciously choosing where to place your energy, you became the master of your spiritual environment. A striking example is found in the story of Nelson Mandela, the great South African leader who endured decades of imprisonment yet refused to be consumed by bitterness or hatred. Mandela famously said, "Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies." His choice to withhold his energy from anger and revenge starved the systems of oppression, dismantling them from within. Such spiritual detachment fueled the liberation of a nation and changed history. Have you considered how refusing to react disarms your adversaries? What new freedoms emerge when emotional battles no longer consume you? How does the silence you maintain speak louder than any argument? What peace fills the space left behind by broken cycles? Romans 12:21. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Your refusal to feed the parasitic pattern with negative energy is a profound act of overcoming rooted in wisdom and spiritual maturity. In contrast, think of Judas Iscariot, the disciple who betrayed Jesus. His failure was rooted in greed, fear, and betrayal, reactive and self-serving choices that led to ruin and heartbreak. Judas's life exemplifies how surrendering to toxic patterns and negative emotions without resistance leads to destruction, not freedom. When the parasite lost its host, your willing energy, it began to die, unable to regenerate or rebuild. By the time those who sought to trap you realized the change, it was too late. The parasite was dead, and you had moved on, free and victorious. They searched for a fight, but you had reclaimed your power and refused to engage. Psalm 18:35 declares, "You provide a broad path for my feet, so that my ankles do not give way." This broad path is the freedom you now walk strong, steady, and unshakable. Stand firm. God's chosen, you have reclaimed your energy and dismantled the enemy's control. This is your moment of victory. Walk boldly in the freedom earned through silence and strength. Some spiritual patterns operate much like a black market economy, hidden yet bustling, not trading in currency, but in emotions, power, and influence. Pain becomes the currency exchanged for control, shame the price paid for silence, and fear the commodity harvested to purchase compliance. This underground system thrives on a steady flow of emotional transactions, keeping toxic cycles alive and well, as Proverbs 4:23 instructs. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Guarding your emotional energy is the first act of shutting down this illicit trade. Have you ever sensed the invisible transactions taking place in your relationships? The silent deals of anger, traded for peace or fear, exchanged for safety. How often do you find yourself caught in a web where emotions become the toll you must pay to move forward? Every time you gave in, every time you reacted with pain or accepted shame, you injected life into this spiritual economy. But then came your decision to stop trading altogether. You refused to hand over pain in response to manipulation. You rejected shame as the cost of peace. You denied fear the power to dictate your choices. This refusal was more than avoidance. It was a complete shutdown of the market, making their currency worthless in your life. Like a sudden economic collapse, where the value of money plummets to nothing, the power dynamics shifted instantly. The system, which thrived on your predictable reactions, found its main supply cut off. Psalm 37:8 urges, "Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret, it leads only to evil." Your withdrawal from their economy was an act of divine wisdom, choosing peace over chaos and control. The manipulators know exactly how to spark a reaction. They stir conflict to harvest your anger, press wounds to force surrender. Yet you refused every bait. The invoice was sent. You simply would not pay. The spiritual economy began collapsing the moment you ceased being a willing participant. When one key supplier withdraws, the entire market destabilizes. You weren't just any supplier, you were a principal source of their power. Without your energy fueling their trade, desperation took root. What happens when those who once united in manipulation begin turning on each other? Scarcity breeds competition, and the system cannibalizes itself. In nature, this resembles the intricate balance of a coral reef ecosystem, where the removal of a single species, like the parrotfish that controls algae growth, causes cascading effects that threaten the entire environment. When the parrotfish disappears, algae overgrows, suffocating the reef's vitality. Have you noticed how your withdrawal similarly suffocated toxic cycles, causing them to unravel from within? A fitting modern example comes from Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani education activist who survived violent opposition and refused to be silenced. She declared, "When the whole world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful." By refusing to engage in the oppressive economy of fear and intimidation, Malala disrupted the system's control and inspired a global movement for change. What new peace fills the space when old conflicts collapse? How does freedom taste when the emotional toll is lifted? What power do you gain when you close the trade routes on manipulation? How does this shift redefine your path forward? Romans 6, 20 promis. The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. Your refusal to engage in the spiritual economy of pain hastened its downfall. Paving a path of peace and victory. Stand tall. God's chosen. You have closed the market on their schemes and reclaimed sovereignty over your spirit. The trade routes lie empty, the currency worthless, and their power forever diminished. Walk boldly in the freedom you forged by refusing to pay the price. Some people continue to fight you based on a map that no longer exists. They hold the coordinates to where you once lived emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, relentlessly aiming their arrows there, expecting to hit familiar vulnerabilities. But what they fail to realize is a crucial truth. The version of you they target no longer exists. That old self has been dismantled, rebuilt, and relocated to a new spiritual address, a place so transformed that their old strategies and attacks cannot reach you anymore. This shift is not simply personal growth. It is a profound architectural remodeling of your spiritual fortress, a complete redesign of your internal landscape that protects you from past assaults. It's a deliberate act of divine intervention, like the renovation of a sacred temple, where old foundations are replaced with stronger, purer stones, making the structure resilient to any assault. You didn't just change your behavior, you changed your atmosphere, your frequency, and your alignment with truth. This means the attacks designed for your old self can't find their mark because they are coded for a past version of your energy signature. Imagine trying to send mail to a house that has been demolished. No matter how confidently the envelope is addressed, it will always be returned to the sender. That is why many old triggers no longer have power over you. The wiring beneath your emotional responses has been rewired, and the pathways the enemy once exploited are now closed. This rewiring is like the brain's neuroplasticity in action. Your spirit has reprogrammed itself to refuse the old signals and embrace a new frequency of peace and strength. Psalm 91, uno declares, "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty." Your new dwelling place is this sacred shelter, a refuge where arrows cannot reach. You have cloaked yourself in a spiritual resonance that masks your location from those who seek to harm you. Your mindset, habits, and faith have created a frequency shield that deflects attacks and confounds the enemy's predictable patterns. This shield is not just a passive barrier, but an active force field, born from daily discipline, prayer, and unwavering trust in divine protection. Have you noticed how words that once cut deeply now bounce off like harmless echoes? How does it feel when the very fabric of your being changes, making old wounds impossible to reopen? What new strength arises when your spiritual frequency elevates beyond the reach of old enemies? How will your new location shape the future you walk into? Each of these questions calls you to reflect on your spiritual metamorphosis and the power you now wield over forces that once held dominion. In psychological terms, this resembles a shift in neural pathways and resonance frequency, where the brain rewires itself to reject toxic stimuli and embrace healing. Your spiritual elevation is akin to an urban planner redesigning a city's blueprint, relocating its inhabitants from danger zones to safe havens. You now live somewhere between Peace Boulevard and Purpose Drive, far from Fear Street and Doubt Avenue, a place where the enemy's GPS can no longer chart a course. This urban metaphor illustrates how intentional spiritual growth creates a landscape where old adversities find no fertile ground to take root. Isaiah 54:17 proclaims, "No weapon forged against you will prevail." Your elevated spiritual position is this unbreachable fortress. Even if the enemy could see you, they could not reach you without ascending themselves, and they refuse to climb. This refusal keeps them trapped in the past, firing futile arrows into empty space while you walk freely on elevated ground. Your spiritual coordinates have changed, and with that change, the battlefield you once occupied has been abandoned. The enemy fires arrows at ghosts. Unaware their ammunition strikes empty air. You have left the war zone and established your kingdom elsewhere, where peace reigns and victory is certain. This relocation signifies more than escape. It marks the beginning of a new reign where you no longer play by the old rules, but by divine authority. Hebrews 12:1 exhorts, "Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." You are running a new race, on a new course marked by spiritual elevation and divine favor. Your footsteps leave an indelible path for others to follow. Perseverance here is not mere endurance, but a dynamic pushing forward, breaking limits and expanding your spiritual territory. The transformation of St. Augustine, the early Christian theologian who journeyed from a life of chaos and error to profound faith and wisdom, he famously said, "The world is a book, and those who do not travel read only one page." His story reminds us that spiritual transformation requires leaving behind old maps and stepping boldly into new, uncharted territories. Augustine's pilgrimage was both literal and spiritual, showing that true growth demands a courageous departure from familiar but destructive patterns. What new horizons are opening as you relocate your spiritual identity? How does this elevation redefine your purpose and power? In what ways will your new kingdom influence those around you? How will you maintain this elevated position amidst life's pressures? These questions invite you to envision the vast potential your spiritual elevation unlocks not only for yourself, but for your entire sphere of influence. Romans 8:31 assure, "If God is for us, who can be against us?" Your spiritual elevation guarantees divine protection and unstoppable strength. This truth stands as a foundation for your confidence, empowering you to walk boldly, knowing that no earthly or spiritual force can thwart the divine plan unfolding through you. Stand firm. God's chosen. You have changed your coordinates. The enemy's arrows fall harmlessly on empty ground. You have built a kingdom where peace prevails, and your reign begins now. Walk forward in this new place of power, shining as a testament to the transforming grace of God. Toxic spiritual systems operate like clockwork, precise, rhythmic, and relentless. They follow an unspoken schedule they count on to keep you bound and trapped. Certain attacks resurface predictably. At the same time, every year, certain triggers ignite during specific seasons of your life. Sometimes these are tied to your birthday, holidays, or even traumatic anniversaries that the enemy knows can reopen old wounds. This was no accident. It was a time loop engineered on your predictability. The enemy carefully studied your emotional patterns, your vulnerabilities aligned with the calendar, and built recurring ambushes accordingly. Have you ever felt the frustrating repetition of pain or conflict, like a broken record spinning the same hurt over and over? What does it mean to be caught in a loop designed to keep you from moving forward? How many seasons of your life felt like déjà vu, with battles you thought you had already won? What would happen if you could step entirely out of that cycle? You did something radical. You stepped out of their timeline. This wasn't merely breaking a habit. It was breaking a spiritual appointment. You cancelled the recurring meetings your enemy expected with your downfall. You stopped showing up for the same battles, the same arguments, the same toxic patterns. By doing so, you removed yourself from the clock they were using to control you. Psalm 98, Divpatsmit urgesus. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. You gained wisdom not just about days, but about spiritual timing, and you chose a new rhythm aligned with God's perfect plan. Once you disrupted their rhythm, their entire strategy began to unravel, like dancers performing without music. They lost their coordination. Insults came, but found no opening. Sabotage was launched, but landed in empty fields. Even spiritual traps laid in advance expired, unused, because you no longer walked into them at their appointed time. This is the power of stepping into God's timing, a frequency unpredictable to your adversaries. Have you sensed a shift when battles that once returned faithfully no longer arrive? How does moving out of enemy seasons feel in your spirit? What does it mean to operate on divine timing, outside human manipulation? How can this freedom reshape your future? Consider the story of Mother Teresa, a beacon of divine timing and faith. Despite countless challenges, she remained steadfast in her mission, trusting God's schedule rather than human urgency. She once said, "God does not require us to succeed, only to be faithful." Her life exemplifies walking confidently in God's time, unaffected by worldly pressures and loops. The adversaries relying on your predictable patterns experience disarray and desperation. Their coordinated plans collapse. The spiritual trapper loses his prey. The saboteur misses his mark. This collapse mirrors the downfall of King Herod the Great, who desperately clung to power, yet was ultimately undone by divine justice, a warning that control built on human manipulation and fear is fleeting and destined to fall. Romans 3, ons encourage. And do this, understanding the present time. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber. You have awakened to a new timeline, one free from loops of control and bondage. You didn't just break the cycle, you moved into an entirely new timeline, one where enemy seasons of control never come again. You now operate on a divine clock, perfectly protected and beautifully unpredictable. Your freedom is assured, your steps ordained by a higher power. Stand boldly, God's chosen. The loops that once ensnared you lie broken behind you. Your new timeline is a kingdom of peace, progress, and divine favor. Walk it confidently, knowing the enemy's watch has ended. Most people believe healing happens when the pain simply stops. Yet in the spiritual realm, that is only half the victory. Some wounds may close on the surface, but deep within, the memory of injury lingers like a dormant virus, waiting patiently for the perfect conditions to reactivate and unleash its poison anew. This hidden archive of trauma is why certain words, faces, places, or even smells could once plunge you back into spirals of old hurt. Your body and soul remembered every echo of betrayal, loss, or abuse. And that memory alone was enough to reopen the wound, keeping cycles alive without a fresh attack. The enemy cleverly avoids creating new wounds when they can exploit your own stored pain. Have you ever wondered why a seemingly small trigger unleashes disproportionate pain? How can something healed still feel raw beneath the surface? What would it mean if the memory of pain was wiped clean? How different would your life be if your emotional software no longer ran on outdated, harmful programs? For years, you may have found yourself bleeding from invisible wounds, emotionally tethered to betrayals and losses you believed were behind you. But what happened to you was extraordinary. You didn't just heal, you deleted the wound's memory. God went deep into the spiritual DNA of your pain and rewrote it. Like a master coder repairing a corrupted file, He erased the emotional data that once stored that injury's trigger points. Salm 147, 3 declares, He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. Your healing is not just restoration, but divine reprogramming at the very core of your being. Now, when the enemy attempts to run the open wound program, the system returns an error file, not found. This level of healing terrifies your adversaries because it removes their most reliable weapon, predictability. They can no longer count on the old cues to manipulate your reactions. The song that once made you weep now brings a smile. The street you once avoided has become a path of peace. The person who once held your worth hostage no longer holds any sway over your identity. This is the deeper truth. Deleting the wound's memory does not mean forgetting the event. It means removing its power to dictate your emotional reactions. You retain the wisdom, lessons, and insights, but carry no emotional landmine. The scar has transformed into something unrecognizable to the enemy, a symbol of victory, not vulnerability. Imagine this transformation like a river that once flooded destructively, but has now carved a new, serene course through the landscape. Its old path, filled with debris and turmoil, no longer exists. Instead, a peaceful flow nourishes the land. Your spirit, too, has redirected its flow, free from the chaos of past pain. An inspiring example is the life of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, one of the most recognized entertainers and entrepreneurs in the world. Before his global success, Johnson faced a series of crushing setbacks, losing his dream NFL career, struggling with depression, and having only $7 to his name. He often says, "The setback is just the foundation for the comeback." By channeling pain into discipline and failure into relentless drive, he transformed personal defeat into a platform of influence, proving that the power to rewrite your story is a choice, not a chance. What if you could consistently choose peace instead of pain? How does your upgraded emotional software transform everyday interactions? What freedom arises when the old wounds no longer have a say in your story? How might your new operating system influence those still trapped in past hurts? Romans 12, 2 exhort. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Your renewed spirit exemplifies this divine transformation, an upgrade beyond mere healing to a complete system overhaul. Stand tall, God's chosen. Your divine reprogramming has rendered the enemy's tactics obsolete. You are no longer a victim of your past, but a victorious architect of your spiritual future. Some patterns persist for generations because they are cloaked in illusions of holiness, tradition, or divine approval, wrapped tightly in cultural customs, family rituals, or even misinterpreted scriptures. They gain a facade of invincibility. "This is just the way things are," becomes the sacred chant that binds those still caught in the cycle. The pattern thrives, not because it's right, but because no one dares to question its authority or existence. But then you came along. You didn't just survive the pattern, you dismantled it from its very foundation. Your freedom shattered their most cherished illusion that this cycle was God's ordained design. The moment you stepped out, you proved it was never divine, never inevitable, and never unbreakable. Have you ever felt the weight of inherited patterns that everyone else seemed to accept as normal? What would it mean to challenge those sacred assumptions quietly but powerfully? How does your breaking free unsettle those who still hold on to the old ways? What truth lies behind the courage it takes to shatter these long-standing cycles? You became living, breathing evidence that what many called truth was, in fact, a well-fed lie. This is why your freedom feels so threatening to them. Your life contradicts the very worldview they depend on. Every smile you wear free of their burdens, every success achieved without compromise, exposes their pattern as counterfeit. You don't need words. Your existence alone rebukes their doctrine. This sharp reality unsettles those who benefit from the status quo. When someone like you breaks a pattern, liberation isn't just personal. It dismantles the unspoken permission others cling to. Jeremiah 6:11 reminds us, stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it. You walk the good way, forcing others to confront the illusions they once hid behind. Before you, they hid behind ignorance, tradition, and fear. Now, your testimony quietly unravels every excuse and facade. The spell is broken, and they feel the shift profoundly. You have become what the pattern's architects feared most: undeniable proof. Proof does not invite debate. It demands acknowledgement, or else rejection and attack. Many will try to discredit you, distort your story, or drag you back into old ways, not just resisting you, but resisting the truth you represent. Psalm 34:15 says, "The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cry." Deep inside, they know you are aligned with God's will, not the counterfeit chains they cling to. You stand as living evidence that God's plans were always for freedom and not for bondage. Each move you made, every silent refusal, every shift in your spiritual identity was a calculated strike against dark forces thriving on pain, reaction, and compliance. You rewired your spirit to reject old summons, starved the parasite feeding on your energy, and stepped out of timelines designed to trap you, refusing to play scripted roles and dismantling economies built on pain, shame, and fear. You collapsed the very foundations those patterns depended on. In the language of psychology and spiritual resonance, you acted like a master architect, redesigning the blueprint of your soul. You changed the frequency, the vibration that defines your entire being, making the old structures obsolete. This elevated architecture of your spirit radiates a protective field that disrupts every attempt of the enemy to re-establish control. The inspiring journey of Bethany Hamilton, the professional surfer who lost her arm in a shark attack at just 13 years old, instead of surrendering to fear or self-pity. Bethany chose resilience, returning to competitive surfing only months later. She once said, "I don't need easy, I just need possible." Her life reflects the power of reprogramming the mind and spirit, transforming tragedy into a platform of courage that inspires millions around the world. What patterns in your life have you dismantled quietly but powerfully? How do you feel as your spiritual architecture strengthens beyond old designs? What new frequency guides your steps today? How will your testimony inspire others still bound by illusions? Romans 12 exhort. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Your transformation exemplifies this renewing, a divine reconstruction of self that commands freedom. Stand tall. God's chosen. You have shattered a system designed to keep you bound. Your spiritual architecture stands unshakable, your frequency unreachable by old patterns. Walk boldly in your freedom. Your reign in this new kingdom has begun. You have deleted the memory of wounds that once held you hostage and become undeniable proof that what they called God's will was never anything but a lie designed to keep you chained. Your very existence now stands as a living testament to freedom, resilience, and divine truth, showing everyone who witnesses your journey that no curse, no cycle, and no spiritual trap is truly unbreakable when met with unwavering faith and fierce determination. This victory transcends the personal. It reverberates through the spiritual realms, shaking the foundations of every system built on deception and bondage. This is not merely your victory, it is a revolution in the spiritual realm, a profound rewriting of history itself, and a radiant beacon of hope for all who feel trapped in their own repeating patterns. You have stepped boldly into a new timeline, one marked by peace that surpasses understanding, power that breaks chains, and purpose that guides every step. The old scripts that once held sway over your soul now lie in ashes, powerless to restrain you. The chains forged by fear, shame, and manipulation are shattered forever, and you walk forward, clothed in the garments of liberty. Your freedom is contagious, igniting sparks of courage and transformation in the hearts of those still bound by darkness. Your light is unstoppable, illuminating paths where once only shadows dwelled. Your story, though already triumphant, is far from over. It is a living epic, unfolding with every breath, every choice, every act of faith. The very patterns that once sought to define you now serve as testimonies to your strength and God's grace. They echo as reminders of battles won and foundations rebuilt. And know this is only the beginning. The kingdom awaits your full arrival. Greater victories, deeper peace, and higher realms of purpose are unfolding just ahead. Stand firm, beloved, for you are chosen, anointed, and empowered to walk this path with boldness. Keep rising, keep shining, and keep rewriting the story that was never meant to confine you, but to glorify the God who made you free. As we draw this journey to a close, hold fast to this eternal truth. You have not merely survived, you have transcended. You have dismantled every spiritual pattern, erased the wounds that sought to define you, and broken chains forged in lies and deception. Your life stands as living evidence that no curse, no generational cycle, and no spiritual trap is insurmountable when met with unwavering faith and divine purpose. This transformation is a testament to the relentless power of God working through you, a radiant beacon of hope and freedom that pierces through the darkest of nights. Your breakthrough is not a solitary victory, it is a clarion call to all who remain shackled in silence and despair. Your story shouts into the heavens, declaring that bondage is broken and the spirit renewed. Walk boldly in this new identity, not as a victim, but as a victorious child of God, an architect of your own destiny under His sovereign hand. If this message resonates with your soul, I urge you to take action. Like this video to affirm your breakthrough. Share it to extend this lifeline of hope to others still fighting battles unseen. And comment below to lift the voices of those who walk alongside you in this journey. Subscribe and ring the notification bell, so you never miss the revelations and encouragement that will continue to fuel your spiritual ascent. To every single one of you, whether you engage by liking, commenting, sharing, or supporting through super thanks, know that your presence here matters profoundly. Your faithfulness breathes life into this mission and strengthens the ripple of God's love and freedom spreading across the earth. May the boundless grace of the Almighty envelop you. May His peace, which surpasses all understanding, guard your heart and mind. May you walk daily in the fullness of His promises, wrapped in protection, empowered by purpose, and illuminated by His unending light. The chains you have broken will never bind you again. The path before you is blessed, and the best chapters of your story are unfolding now. Stand firm. Beloved, rise up in the authority and freedom that is yours by divine decree. This is not the end, it is the glorious beginning.